Beaten for being stupid. This canine German Shepherd puppy couldn't even turn his head without shaking in shame. He was just a helpless German Shepherd pup, trembling in a dark corner, his little body too afraid to move. Punished simply for not understanding, they called him stupid and worthless. And every cruel word cut deeper than the last blow. His fragile frame shook as he cried silently, too ashamed to lift his head. But what happens when someone finally sees the broken soul behind those sorrowful eyes? Get ready for a story of unthinkable cruelty and an even more powerful redemption. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories of hope, healing, and the unwavering loyalty of canine heroes. That night in Houston, Texas, the rain poured heavily, flooding the gutters and washing over the crumbling sidewalks. In a back alley, behind a rundown training facility, a soaked canine German Shepherd puppy cowered beneath a rusted dumpster. His fur was soaked, clumped with blood and grime. His ribs protruded beneath a thin, muddy coat. His name was Scout, or at least that's what the tattered tag on his collar read. But to the men who trained there, he was just a dumb mutt. Every time he misunderstood a command, their anger came down on him like a hammer. He was too young, too small, too weak, and for that he paid dearly. Hit for flinching, kicked for moving the wrong way. He had learned to make himself invisible. Now he curled up tightly, trembling, ears pinned down as thunder rumbled overhead. Every noise made him flinch. He no longer felt worthy of living. Then, through the storm, footsteps, measured, calm, and steady, approached. Ethan Callahan had just come off duty from the local fire station. A decorated firefighter and former canine handler in the military, Ethan had seen pain. But something about that alley pulled him in like destiny was calling. His boots splashed in puddles as he turned the corner. And then he saw them, two wide, terrified eyes peeking out from beneath the dumpster. "Hey there, buddy," Ethan said gently. Crouching down, his voice was soft, warm, almost swallowed by the rain. Scout couldn't even look at him. His small body remained frozen, too afraid to respond. Ethan's heart ached at the sight. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered. Slowly he extended a hand. No sudden moves, no raised voice. Only patience. The minutes stretched on. Scout's breaths came in quick, shallow bursts. Then with a hesitant whimper, his head inched toward the hand. Their eyes met, one filled with pain, the other with promise. "That's it, little guy. You're safe now," Ethan whispered. With every ounce of courage left in his tiny heart, Scout dragged himself forward. When his nose touched Ethan's fingers, the floodgates opened. He collapsed into Ethan's arms with soft, heartbreaking cries. Ethan wrapped his jacket around the shivering puppy, gently cradling him. Scout's body was ice cold. Still hiding his face under Ethan's chin, he seemed too ashamed to be seen. "You're not stupid, you're brave," Ethan whispered, "and I'm going to prove that to you." As they stepped out of the alley, the storm lightened, and for the first time in his short, painful life, Scout felt something unfamiliar. Hope. But healing would take more than a kind rescue. Scout's scars ran deep, some visible, many not. The next morning, sunlight filled Ethan's modest living room with golden warmth. Scout lay curled up on a blanket near the fireplace, still shivering now and then. He hadn't made a sound since they'd arrived. His eyes never left the floor. Ethan watched from across the room, sipping coffee. He knew recovery wasn't a moment. It was a journey, and healing the soul was the hardest part. "Hey, Scout," he said gently, crouching down. He set a shallow bowl of warm chicken broth in front of the pup. "You've got to eat something, little guy." Scout's ears flicked at the smell, but he didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the door, as if expecting the worst. Ethan sighed. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you again." But a dog who's only known pain doesn't trust words so easily. Later, Ethan brought out a soft leather collar and a small red chew toy shaped like a fire hydrant. He placed them beside Scout and stepped back. Hours passed. As the sun dipped, Scout finally lifted his head. He sniffed the toy, then cautiously reached out a paw to touch it. His eyes flicked toward Ethan, full of doubt. Ethan smiled gently and stayed still. This was Scout's moment, a test of whether the world might be a little less scary. Slowly, with a trembling paw, Scout dragged the toy closer. He didn't chew on it. He just held it between his paws like he was holding on to the idea that life might not always hurt. The next day, Ethan decided it was time to explore the world beyond. The living room. He gently clipped a leash to Scout's new collar. The click made Scout drop flat to the floor, tail tucked, body tense. "It's okay, buddy. This isn't what you think it is," Ethan whispered. He knelt beside him, gently stroking his head. It took nearly an hour before the tension began to ease. Then, with a soft tug, Ethan led Scout into the backyard. Scout's paws touched the grass and something shifted. He lifted his nose, breathing in the scent of earth and freedom. His ears twitched, and for the first time his tail gave a faint, uncertain wag. Ethan crouched nearby. "Take your time. You're doing great." Scout stepped forward, then again. His tail wagged once more, a little more sure this time. And then it happened. He lifted his head toward the sky, eyes wide with wonder, and let out a small, uncertain bark. It was the first true sound of hope Ethan had heard from him. But healing isn't a straight path. That night, Scout wouldn't sleep alone. When Ethan tried to leave him in the living room, the puppy whimpered, trembling with fear. Without hesitation, Ethan picked him up and brought him to bed, placing him at the foot. "It's all right, Scout. I'm right here," he whispered, turning off the light. And for the first time in days, Scout drifted into sleep, Ethan's steady breathing guiding him to peaceful dreams. But the true test of their bond was still ahead. Over the next week came small victories and painful setbacks. Scout slowly allowed himself to be brushed. He took hesitant steps in the yard, but the scars still haunted him. One quiet afternoon, Ethan decided it was time for a new step, a gentle walk beyond the yard, through the nearby park. As they reached the sidewalk, Scout froze. His body stiffened, tail tucked, ears flat. His legs refused to move. "It's okay, Scout. Just a little walk," Ethan said, crouching beside him. Beside him, nobody was going to hurt him, but the leash, just the gentle tug of it, seemed to awaken old fears. Scout's eyes darted nervously, his breathing quickened, and his small frame began to tremble. Ethan knelt in front of him. "Hey, look at me," he said softly, placing his hand gently under Scout's chin. "You're not that scared little puppy anymore. You're safe, you're strong." Scout whimpered but didn't bolt. Slowly, Ethan sat on the ground right there on the pavement. His presence was calm and patient. He began to hum an old lullaby his mother used to sing when he was a child. The soft tune seemed to ease the tension. After several long minutes, Scout took one step forward, then another. They didn't get far that day, barely to the end of the block, but every step Scout took was a battle won. The next day, something changed. Scout stood at the back door, staring out at the open yard. His tail gave a small, determined wag. When Ethan opened the door, Scout stepped out without hesitation, his head higher than before. Just as things seemed to be improving, a setback came. While on a short walk, a loud bang echoed from a nearby construction site, metal slamming against metal. The sound was sharp, aggressive, familiar in all the wrong ways. Scout froze, paralyzed by fear. His legs buckled and he collapsed onto the ground, covering his head with his paws as if bracing for a blow. Ethan's heart shattered. He knelt beside him, pulling the trembling puppy into his arms. "It's okay, Scout. It's okay. You're safe. I promise," he whispered over and over, rocking him gently like a frightened child. That night, Scout wouldn't let Ethan out of his sight. Every time Ethan stood to leave the room, Scout cried softly, his eyes wide with terror. Ethan gave up trying to sleep apart from him. He grabbed a pillow and lay down on the floor next to Scout's blanket. In the dim light, Scout crawled closer inch by inch until his small head rested against Ethan's chest. His tiny body finally stopped shaking as Ethan's steady heartbeat lulled him into a restless sleep. The following morning, Ethan made a decision. "This isn't going to be your life anymore, buddy," he said as he gently scratched behind Scout's ear. "You're not broken. You're just waiting to become who you were always meant to be." Ethan contacted a trusted friend from his military days, a retired K9 trainer named Sarah Jennings. She specialized in rehabilitating traumatized service dogs. If anyone could help Scout heal, it was her. That afternoon, they loaded Scout into the truck. Scout sat in the passenger seat, his tiny head peeking out from under the blanket, eyes filled with uncertainty, but also something new: curiosity. As they drove toward the rehabilitation center, Ethan glanced down at him. "We're going to help you find your strength, little warrior," he whispered. Scout's eyes met his, and for the first time there wasn't just fear in them. There was a glimmer of trust. Neither of them knew the real test was yet to come, and it would push Scout further than he had ever gone before. The rehabilitation center sat on the outskirts of town, a peaceful property surrounded by wide-open fields and rolling hills. It was a place designed for healing, not just for dogs, but for the people who loved them. As soon as they arrived, Scout pressed himself against the floorboard of the truck, his ears flat and body trembling. Ethan reached over, gently placing his hand on Scout's back. "You're not going in there alone, buddy. I'm with you every step," he whispered. Sarah Jennings, the retired K9 trainer, waited outside. She had a calm, commanding presence, the kind that animals instinctively trusted. Her silver hair was pulled back under a worn baseball cap, and her blue eyes softened when they landed on Scout. "Poor little guy's been through a war, hasn't he?" she said quietly, as Ethan carried Scout in his arms. "Worse," Ethan replied, his jaw tight. "But he's a fighter." Sarah nodded. "Let's show him what peace feels like." The first few days were slow and careful. Sarah didn't rush Scout. She spent hours simply sitting near him, allowing him to adjust to her presence without pressure. When Scout shook uncontrollably or flinched at sudden noises, she calmly reassured him, never raising her voice or forcing contact. Ethan stayed close throughout the sessions, watching every small breakthrough with pride. On the third day, Scout took his first few steps toward Sarah without coaxing, his tail wagging ever so slightly. But the real challenge came during what Sarah called the trust test. In a large enclosed field, Sarah placed Scout in the center and asked Ethan to step to the far end. The idea was for Scout to cross the open space on his own, to choose trust over fear. At first, Scout stood frozen, his little paws planted firmly in the grass. His eyes darted between Sarah and Ethan, uncertainty clouding his expression. Ethan crouched low at the far end of the field, his voice calm and steady. "Come on, Scout, you can do this. I'm right here, buddy." Scout whimpered, his front paw lifting slightly off the ground before retreating. His heart pounded so loudly in his tiny chest that Ethan could almost feel it. "Take your time, Scout," Ethan called again, his voice filled with quiet encouragement. Scout's legs trembled as he stepped forward, then stopped. Step by step, he inched his way across the field, every muscle tense, every movement uncertain. And then, halfway across, a loud crack echoed in the distance, a car backfiring from the nearby road. Scout immediately dropped to the ground, covering his head with his paws, his small body shaking violently. Ethan's heart clenched, but he didn't rush to him. He knew this was a moment Scout had to face for himself. From across the field, Ethan called softly, "It's okay, Scout, I'm here. Nothing's going to hurt you. Remember, you're not that scared little puppy anymore. You're stronger than this." For a long, painful moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Scout lifted his head. His eyes met Ethan's, and something flickered there, something stronger than fear. With a determined little huff, Scout stood. His legs still wobbled, but he pressed on, step after shaky step, until he reached Ethan's arms. When he finally collapsed into Ethan's embrace, Ethan felt a tear roll down his cheek. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, holding the trembling puppy close. "You did it." That night, back at home, Scout didn't hide under the table or flinch at every sound. He curled up beside Ethan on the couch, his head resting on Ethan's leg, his breathing slow and steady. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Scout had crossed a bridge he thought he never could. And little did they know, fate had one more challenge waiting, one that would test everything they'd built and show the world just how brave Scout had become. The days that followed were different. Scout walked taller, his tail lifted higher. His eyes, once clouded by fear, now held a spark of life. Each morning, he would wait by the door with his leash in his mouth, ready for the walks he once dreaded. Ethan couldn't help but smile every time he saw it. It was the kind of progress that made every tough moment worth it. But just as things seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm, an unexpected event shattered that calm. One sunny afternoon, Ethan received a call from his old fire station. They were short-staffed on a critical search and rescue mission. A child had gone missing in the woods near the outskirts of the city. Time was running out, and they needed every experienced hand on deck. Ethan's heart tightened. He hadn't participated in a mission since retiring, but this wasn't about him. It was about saving a life. He glanced down at Scout, who was lying calmly at his feet, chewing on his favorite toy. Could he handle this? Would the fear return if Scout faced something that reminded him of his traumatic past? Before he could overthink it, Scout stood up and walked over, sitting in front of Ethan with an expectant look, as if he knew exactly what was happening and wanted to help. "You really think you're ready for this, buddy?" Ethan whispered, kneeling to meet his eyes. Scout's tail gave a confident wag. An hour later, they arrived at the search site. The area was dense, the trees thick with undergrowth, and the sun was already beginning to dip behind the hills. Search teams were scattered throughout the forest, calling out the missing child's name. Ethan tightened his grip on Scout's leash. "Listen, Scout. This isn't training anymore. This is real. There's a little boy out there who needs, us. You think you can help me find him?" Scout stood tall, his ears perked and alert. His body language had changed. He wasn't the broken, trembling pup Ethan had found under a dumpster. He was focused, ready, and determined. They moved into the forest, Ethan allowing Scout to take the lead. The pup's nose went to work immediately, sniffing along the trail. For a while, there was nothing but the crunch of leaves and the distant calls of the other searchers. Then, without warning, Scout froze. His ears shot forward and his body tensed. He let out a sharp, short bark and began pulling at the leash, leading Ethan toward a narrow path that wound deeper into the woods. "Easy, boy, lead the way," Ethan encouraged, following closely behind. Scout's pace quickened, his snout low to the ground, tail high and wagging rapidly. Minutes passed as they navigated through the thorns and over fallen branches, and then they heard it. A faint, desperate sob. "Help, please." Ethan's heart raced. He pushed through the last line of bushes, and there, at the base of a small ravine, sat a young boy no older than 7. His clothes were torn and his face was streaked with dirt and tears. Scout immediately descended the slope, carefully making his way to the boy. He licked the child's face gently, his body language calm and reassuring. The boy wrapped his small arms around Scout's neck and cried into his fur. Ethan quickly followed, crouching down beside them. "Hey, kiddo, you're safe now. We've got you," he said softly. The boy looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "I was so scared, and then this dog. He found me." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat as he watched Scout sit proudly by the boy's side, his head held high like he'd always belonged in that moment. That night, after the boy was safely reunited with his family, Ethan sat on the porch with Scout beside him. The air was cool and the stars stretched endlessly overhead. Ethan reached down and stroked Scout's head. "You were incredible today, Scout. You saved that boy's life. You saved mine, too, in more ways than you'll ever understand." Scout leaned into his touch, his tail thumping against the wooden porch. He wasn't broken anymore. He was a hero, and, for the first time in his life, he knew it. The rescue mission had transformed something deep inside Scout. In the days that followed, his confidence bloomed like a flower breaking through concrete. He no longer hesitated at the door when it was time for a walk. He greeted strangers with a cautious but curious glance instead of shrinking away. And every evening he sat proudly by Ethan's side, watching the sunset like a soldier standing guard. But the greatest moment of Scout's journey was still ahead. It started with a call from Sarah Jennings. She invited Ethan and Scout to a public demonstration event for rehabilitated working dogs, a chance to show the community the power of second chances. It wasn't a competition, but for Scout, it would be the biggest test of his recovery. Crowds, loud noises, unfamiliar places, all the things that once reduced him to a trembling shadow. Ethan hung up the phone and looked at Scout, who was now lounging lazily on the couch, his head resting on Ethan's old fire station jacket. "What do you think, buddy?" Ethan asked. "Ready to show the world what you're made of?" Scout lifted his head and gave a small, confident bark, as if to say, "Let's do this." The day of the event arrived with bright blue skies and a cool spring breeze. The town's main park was buzzing with activity. Stalls were set up, children ran across the grass, and the loudspeaker crackled to life with announcements. Ethan could feel the tension creeping into his chest. This was a lot, even for a seasoned adult, let alone a dog who had once hidden under dumpsters to escape the world. He knelt beside Scout near the entrance to the demonstration ring. "Listen, Scout, this is just like the forest, okay? One step at a time. I'm right here," Ethan said softly, running his fingers through Scout's thickening coat. Scout took a deep breath, his nose lifting into the breeze. And then, with surprising determination, he took the first step onto the field. The announcer introduced them to the crowd, his voice booming through the speakers. Scout flinched at first, his ears twitching back, but Ethan placed a steady hand on his back. "You're safe. You've got this," he whispered. They walked through the obstacle course set up for the demonstration, tires to step through, small hurdles to jump, even a section simulating a rescue situation. At every station, Scout paused just briefly, his instincts battling with his newfound courage. But each time he looked up at Ethan, his tail wagging cautiously, and pressed on. The final test was the hardest. A sudden burst of loud noises played. Through the speakers, recordings of thunderstorms and sirens. The sounds echoed across the field. Scout froze, his body stiff. For a moment, Ethan saw the fear flash through his eyes, the echoes of his past trying to drag him back into darkness. "Scout, look at me," Ethan said, kneeling in front of him. "That's not your life anymore. You're stronger than this, remember?" Scout stared into Ethan's eyes. Slowly, the tension in his body melted away. With a small shake of his head, he took a step forward, then another until he reached the end of the course. The crowd erupted in applause, but Scout didn't seem to care about the noise or the cheers. His eyes were locked on Ethan, and his tail wagged proudly as if he knew he had beaten the demons of his past. That night, as they returned home, Ethan sat on the porch with Scout curled up at his feet. "You did it, Scout," Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You proved to the world and to yourself that no matter how broken the past tried to make you, you can still rise above it." Scout let out a long, contented sigh, his body relaxed and peaceful. And in that quiet moment under the starlit sky, Ethan realized something important. This journey wasn't just about saving Scout. It was about how Scout had saved him, too. Spring slowly turned to summer, and life settled into a beautiful rhythm for Ethan and Scout. The once fragile and broken pup was now a strong, confident young German shepherd. His coat had grown thick and shiny, his muscles well developed from daily walks and playful training exercises. But more than that, his spirit was whole again. Every morning, Scout would sit at the window, waiting patiently for Ethan to finish his coffee. As soon as the leash came off the hook, Scout would run to the door with a burst of excitement, tail wagging like a flag in the wind. His confidence was contagious, and the small community that once pitied the trembling puppy now admired the heroic demeanor he had become. One afternoon, the mayor's office called. Scout had been officially nominated for the town's annual Hero of the Year award, a title usually reserved for human citizens. But this year, after the miraculous rescue of the lost boy and Scout's remarkable transformation, The town decided it was time to honor a four-legged hero. Ethan stood by the window holding the phone, his heart full of pride as he watched Scout nap peacefully in a sunbeam on the living room floor. "Looks like you're about to become famous, buddy," Ethan whispered with a smile. The ceremony was held in the town square. It seemed like everyone had shown up that day. Families, children, veterans, even the local news station. A large banner hung above the stage, honoring courage, Hero of the Year. Ethan adjusted the small medal hanging from Scout's collar before they took the stage. "Remember, this is your moment," he said quietly. "You've earned it." As they walked onto the platform, Scout carried himself like a true hero. His head was high, his gait strong, his eyes alert but calm. The same park where he once froze in fear was now filled with applause meant just for him. When the mayor handed Ethan the plaque and declared Scout the official Hero of the Year, the crowd erupted. But what happened next silenced everyone. Scout, sensing the weight of the moment, stood in front of the microphone and let out a loud, proud bark that echoed through the square. It wasn't a bark of fear or anxiety. It was a declaration. "I am not broken. I am brave." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he crouched beside him. "You did it, Scout, you really did it." That night they sat together on the back porch, a soft summer breeze rolling across the yard. Scout lay with his head resting on Ethan's lap, the medal still around his neck. "You know," Ethan began, his voice low and reflective, "when I found you that night under the dumpster, I thought I was saving you, but the truth is, you saved me." He took a deep breath and continued, his eyes focused on the horizon. "I was lost after I left the fire department. I didn't know who I was without that uniform, without the missions, without the purpose. And then you showed up, scared, broken, but still fighting. And you reminded me that life isn't about what we've lost. It's about what we're still willing to fight for." Scout looked up at him with his big, intelligent eyes and let out a quiet, contented sigh. From that day forward, Scout wasn't just a hero by title. He became a symbol, the community, a living reminder that no matter how dark the past, there is always hope for a brighter future. He visited schools with Ethan, teaching children about kindness and resilience. He sat beside veterans struggling with PTSD, his calming presence helping them open up in ways they hadn't in years. He even became a therapy dog at the local hospital, walking the sterile halls with quiet grace, bringing comfort to those who needed it most. And through it all, Ethan remained by his side, his rescuer, his friend, his family. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and Scout grew tired from a long day at the hospital, Ethan looked down at him and smiled. "Thank you for choosing to live, Scout. Thank you for teaching me how to live again." Scout pressed his head against Ethan's chest, his eyes closing peacefully. In that quiet, perfect moment, nothing else mattered. Not the pain of the past, not the hardships they had faced. All that mattered was this: they had found each other. And together they had turned pain into purpose, fear into courage, and a broken life into something whole.